If you're looking for the ultimate American-made off-road ready SUV, it's pretty hard to beat the Ford Bronco. When this nameplate first returned to the States back in 2021, it really showed Jeep enthusiasts especially that you could essentially have an off-road ready factory-built machine that doesn't necessarily beat you up when you drive it out on the street. Now, part of the sales success for the latest Bronco has to do with the different variants that Ford continues to offer and the updates they continue to make. So for 2025, Ford is introducing a new trim level called the Ford Bronco Stroppe Edition. Now, this model is designed to be an homage to Bill Stroppe, a Baja-ready off-road racer that used to work with Ford back in the 1960s and 70s. This model is essentially the most capable version of the two-door Bronco, also equipped with the EcoBoost twin-turbo V6. So the big question I want to answer, for those of you who are looking for the ultimate off-road version of the Bronco and you don't necessarily want the added heft, size, or price of the Raptor, how does the latest version of the Bronco Stroppe Edition stack up? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the unique styling differences of the Bronco Stroppe Edition, I thought I'd remind you guys what's going on underneath the hood. Now, Ford continues to offer a choice between 3 different engines in the Bronco. However, if you guys are looking for the Bronco two-door for 2025 with the EcoBoost V6, this is now the only trim to offer it. And as you can see underneath the hood of the latest Bronco, it's not the prettiest looking engine bay, but what you're going to find is a longitudinally mounted 2.7 liter gasoline direct injection twin turbocharged V6. It's part of their EcoBoost engine family. This engine is typically a $2,700 upcharge or $2,300 upcharge depending on the trim. However, Ford no longer offers the two-door with the V6 unless you buy this particular trim. In fact, Ford has now limited the amount of trims where you can get the two-door version. It all goes out through a 10-speed automatic transmission, and the power figures remain the same at 330 horsepower and 415 pound-feet of torque. That's about 30 more horsepower versus the standard 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. And then, of course, there's the Bronco Raptor, which has a bigger 3-liter V6 twin turbo, which I haven't had a chance to drive yet. This model also comes standard with Ford's full-time four-wheel drive system with the Sasquatch package, so you get locking front and rear diffs along with their goes over any terrain drive mode functions we'll talk about later on during the interior. Now, fuel economy is not a strong suit with any Bronco. It's rated at 17 in the city and 18 on the highway, so pretty abysmal numbers. Thankfully, this is designed to run on regular gas. It has a 16.9 gallon fuel tank. The four-door models will have a bigger 21 gallon fuel tank, which means with this model here, you'll be lucky to do around 300 miles of range on a full tank. Now, Ford doesn't quote a 0 to 60 time. I've gotten times before ranging from 6.3 all the way up to 6.8 seconds, depending, of course, on the trim configuration, because a lot of the Broncos have very big varying degrees of weight. This model is capable of towing up to 3,500 pounds. The Raptor, however, can tow up to 4,500 pounds. And as this car sits, it weighs in at around 4,700 pounds. So compared to the Bronco Heritage that I tested around 1.5 years ago with this engine, this model is around 500 pounds lighter. But closing the matte finish on the hood, you can see this model definitely stands out even more than any other Bronco models, and that's because of the wild paint job. In fact, the paint job itself is it's comprised of, I guess, 5 different colors, technically 4 main colors, but the front grille is actually a different shade of white versus the rest of the white along the window frame or along the middle part of the body. You can see the matte finish on the hood with this black is designed to essentially reduce glare if you guys are off-roading. It certainly looks interesting, of course, with all the multiple colors. These little tie-down hooks here are really nice if you guys plan to put something on the roof of the Bronco. This front fascia, you can see, is painted in frost white, so it's a slightly different white finish. You can see you don't have the reflector or the projector style LED headlights. You do get the reflectors with their signature LED daytime running light. The Bronco logo here is bright and code orange, along with the rest of the lower fascia of the vehicle, along with the front tow hooks. You get the steel bumpers as standard on the Stroppe Edition, which is a nice touch, and Ford does offer a recovery winch, which my test car doesn't have. This being an off-road ready version, of course, you do get skid plates underneath and around 11.5 inches of ground clearance, courtesy of the standard Sasquatch package on this model. And overall, for a vehicle that's been on the market for the past almost 5 years, it still gets a lot of attention, especially when you have it in this wild paint job. People definitely give you a thumbs up and they just think it looks really cool. especially when you see it out on the road. Now, moving around the side profile, again, this model is only offered as the two-door Bronco, which means around a 175-inch overall length with a 100-inch long wheelbase. So keep in mind, if you guys go for the four-door version, it's roughly 13 inches longer than the two-door version. And those numbers that I was quoting you actually don't include the extra length of the spare tire, which I believe is like an extra 10 inches if you add the spare tire that's hanging off the back. Now, being that this vehicle has, of course, the Sasquatch package, you're riding on 35-inch tall tires, which means there are 315/70 R17. You have these really beefy looking tires on Bridgestone Territory all-terrain tires. You can see the wheels themselves, 17-inch black finish, all disc brakes, of course. And then this model comes, of course, with the Fox 3.0 suspension system, which is an available feature on other Broncos for an extra $2,300. It's not quite as hardcore as the live valve shocks that you get on the Raptor, but of course the Raptor is going to be the most off-road capable version, but this is still definitely pretty badass. Now you can see the fender flares are body colored. They're basically code orange here, Atlas white here, and, or I'm sorry, white over here. I forgot the color, the name of the white, but then you have Atlas blue at the top. So it's really, again, a really cool color combination, a hodgepodge of colors. It actually screams America to me. It almost looks like a red exterior color as opposed to green, but or as opposed to orange. But remember, this is called Code Orange. You can see there's a very subtle Stroppe Edition badge here, along with an unpainted side mirror with integrated turn signals. Or it does have a 360 camera, I'm sorry, along with a camera that's kind of mounted underneath here. And then this model having the hardtop, you have these panels, removable panels, and you can also remove the entire top. Ford still does not offer a retractable, like soft canvas top where it functions like as a sunroof, like what Jeep offers on the Wrangler. So I'm hoping Ford will eventually offer that. You can see Bronco is also spelled out in a graphic on the side of the vehicle on the rear quarter panel, which is definitely a nice touch. And then moving over to the rear of the vehicle, you can see very modern with the full LED taillight design with LED turn signals. I also like the big beefy spare on the back, which is a matching alloy. That's a necessity if you guys plan to go off-roading. Here on the back tailgate, you can see it's also a matte black finish, and you also have the steel bumpers underneath here. You do have some recovery tow hooks, and then the exhaust system is kind of tucked underneath the rear bumper there to not be in the way when you're off-roading. Now looking at the cargo area, you can see it's got a side opening door here, which when you open up the cargo area, this is kind of where the two-door version does have a lot less cargo space than the four-door. Ford says you get around 22 cubic feet of storage space with the seats up. If you want to fold the seats down, which looks like they don't actually fold down in a completely flat manner. Actually, they will fold down flatter if you pull the seat cushion out. Ford says it'll expand the cargo to around 52 cubic feet of space, which is usable, but keep in mind the four-door offers roughly 12 more cubic feet with the seats up, which expands to nearly 80 cubic feet when you fold down all the seats. So the two-door definitely is the more cool-looking option, but at the same time, if you value the practicality, the four-door variant is probably going to be a better fit for most people. Now, once you get past the wild paint job for this Bronco Stroppe edition, let's go ahead and talk about the interior. Before we get inside, however, here's the key fob for the vehicle. You can see this is Ford's latest intelligent access key. I do think it's time for Ford to give us a brand new key fob. This is just too big and bulky for my taste, but at least it has the Bronco logo on there. It's got the typical buttons here for unlock, lock, remote start, and panic. There's no power lift gate or anything like that on this vehicle. So kind of keep that in mind as I approach the door handle, which as you can see is an unpainted plastic material. If you touch this area, that will lock the doors for you. The mirrors sadly are not power folding. To unlock it, just touch the back of the door handle and that will unlock the door. And by the way, this color is called Oxford White. I don't know why I managed to forget the name of the color, but it's a different white versus the frost white on the front of the vehicle. Now looking at the interior, the Stroppe edition only comes with the marine grade black vinyl seat. So this is a synthetic leather material. It's designed to be very durable, where you can essentially wipe off any dirt or water or allow it to get wet. It has some contrast code orange stitching on it with the Bronco bucking horse logo, of course, embossed into the actual seat back. The seats themselves are completely manual. They're like a 6-way manually adjustable. This is kind of where I was hoping for the price point Ford would throw in some power seats, but the seats themselves, for a vinyl material, they're relatively comfortable, well padded. I just noticed it doesn't offer much shoulder support for me, so always try the seats out for yourself, see if you actually like the seats. Looking at the door panel materials, you can see these doors are designed to come off, but Ford does put some slightly padded material here, slightly padded over here. You can see that Oxford White comes through on the door panel as well. You have lots of hard touch plastic here. You have a silver painted plastic door handle. You have your door lock switch here. And then of course, being that the doors come off, the window controls are located in the center console. You do have some exposed screw heads and some storage pockets here. But overall, you have this nice little steel running board to get in. It definitely makes a very, rugged utilitarian impression. I love the fact that there's exposed screw heads here. There's a nice grab handle to help short people like myself get in once I hoist myself up. Now, as I shut the door doesn't have this most solid sounding thunk, but remember, they're designed to actually come off, and this is supposed to be a convertible. Starting the vehicle up, you can see the start stop button is down here where you'd expect it to be. And this car is not a hybrid or a mild hybrid, so it has a very traditional starter noise with the forward chime. You have an all-digital 12-inch gauge cluster here with a 12-inch center infotainment system, which includes Sync 4, which also has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This system, you can see, is their older technology. It's nothing really super special. It's got built-in GPS, obviously, and for the most part, it's easy to use. I just find that the software behind it is very laggy and slow, especially as you start going through the different icons, especially when you first start the vehicle up. It can take a while for it to start up. Right now, it seems to be working perfectly, which it doesn't always do, so that's always interesting when I'm trying to show the system. Now, you can see the upgraded Bang & Olufsen stereo is also included. If you guys are an audiophile, you're going to prefer that. I do like how there's actual contrast stitching and leather covering or vinyl covering here for the upper dash. These buttons here to control your front and rear locker, your axle or sway bar disconnect. It also has like a trail turn assist, your hazard, and your stability control off switches here. Ford also throws in 2 USB-C charging ports here if you want to mount a GoPro, for example, up on the dash, along with this additional shelf over here. This is kind of painted in the same, I believe, frost white as the front with the Bronco logo in orange, which is really nice. If I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there's your full 360 camera, which includes trajectory, parking, or actually no parking sensors. I take that back. But the quality and resolution is fine. You can, it looks like, go into several different views if you'd like, but it's not quite as immersive for the camera tech as some of its other competitors, so kind of keep that in mind. Right here you can see you've got your dual zone automatic climate control function along with some chunky knobs for your tuning and your volume, which I like. You have your 3-level heated seats here, no cooled seats, along with your 1-level heated steering wheel, which, by the way, the steering wheel itself, no paddles. I think the Raptor has paddles. It does offer a manual tilt telescoping adjustment, so you can get a pretty comfortable driving position in this vehicle, which is nice. The view is also pretty good. I like seeing those little strap tie down areas there on the hood, which is cool. Your drive mode selector and 4-wheel drive selector is here. You can see there's 4 different types of 4-wheel drive, along with, it looks like a terrain mode here, or a trail control. That's what Ford calls it. And then if you go to your GOAT mode here, you can switch between a normal, a slippery, an eco, sand, mud ruts, Baja, and then of course a rock crawl mode. There is no dedicated sport mode with this vehicle. Most of the times you're going to be driving it in its normal setting anyways. You can see your window controls are here. They are 1 touch up down for both the windows, which is a nice touch, and they also feel pretty high quality. I prefer them here versus where Jeep puts them over here. This is a better location. You've got your 2 USB charging ports, an A and a C. This is not a wireless phone charging pad, but it's a nice place to put your phone. This also is removable here. I think this is actually a $135 accessory that my test car has, which this is super expensive for 135 bucks. There's also a placard here to let you know you have the special Bronco. Slightly padded center console. If I open that up, it's actually pretty deep. You could put some extra storage in there. And then the glove box, you can see, is it kind of just cheaply falls. It's not damped or lined with felt, but it's a pretty decent size at least. Like I mentioned earlier, the seats are pretty comfortable and supported. I just noticed it was lacking shoulder support for my 5'7" frame. You can see there are some aux switches here, which you can easily, retrofit and add different accessories if you'd like. LED map lighting, and then these panels, they basically just come off by untwisting that and untwisting that and untwisting that, and then the panel just comes off as a piece. It's 3 different pieces, so it's kind of a pain. You have to take them off and store them somewhere. But overall, the interior isn't that much different than other Broncos. It's not luxurious, but it's certainly utilitarian. I didn't hear any squeaks and rattles in this interior, and the tech is mostly fine. But I would like to see Ford eventually upgraded to their Ford Digital Experience system, so kind of keep that in mind. Now, moving into the back seat of the Bronco 2-door model, as you can see, you can essentially get in from either the driver or the passenger side. Just pull this latch up, and then the seat should just kind of slide itself forward. That's kind of where being a manual seat's actually technically a good thing. As you can see, when you slide it all the way forward, it has a pretty decent opening to get into the back seat. And as you can see, it only seats 2 people across, so this is a 4-seater vehicle. So keep that in mind. As I get back here, let's go ahead and wedge our way over onto the passenger side here so I can show you guys what the legroom space is like. Ford says there's around 35 inches of legroom back here, which is around 1.5 inches less versus the 4-door models. And for a vehicle that, you know, is pretty small on the outside, it's actually not too bad for somebody of my height at 5'7". You do have, it looks like, 2 USB charging ports, an actual power outlet back here, which is a nice unexpected touch. No rear seat air vents though. And then Ford has 2 little netted storage pockets along with these like others, I guess, areas where you can hook some things there. In terms of the materials, it's all hard touch plastic. Now there is a pretty decent sized window back here, but again, this is designed for the roof panel to come off. This is all hard touch plastic. You do have a cup holder here and a cup holder there. These headrests actually are not too bad. I can get back here and be relatively comfortable. In terms of the headroom space, you do have a ton of headroom space at least, but just keep in mind, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get back here with only having 2 doors. So if you guys actually need to put adults back here on a more regular basis, I highly recommend going with the 4-door version. So ever since the Ford Bronco nameplate came back to the States back in 2021, it has been such a huge success for Ford. And I think it's actually been the key factor in reducing the amount of Wrangler sales that Jeep usually has. I mean, Ford's basically been gorging themselves on this segment. So it's no surprise that the company would keep trying to keep the Bronco fresh by introducing new variants. Case in point, this Bronco Stroppe edition, or Stroppe edition. I'm probably butchering this poor guy's last name, but regardless, this model is now the only way that you can get a 2-door EcoBoost V6 Bronco. So if you want the twin turbo V6 with 2 doors, this is the only way you can get it, which means you have a 330 horsepower, 2.7 liter twin turbo V6 hooked up to a 10-speed auto with Ford's full-time 4-wheel drive system with a locking front and rear diff. And that's because this model comes with the Sasquatch package. The last time that I tested this combination, I believe I've gotten 0 to 60 times from 6.3 to 6.8 seconds. The 2-door version, however, is lighter at around 4,700 pounds. So this one should be a little bit quicker versus the 4-door Heritage edition that I tested about a year and a half or 2 or so. So let's go ahead and put the transmission is basically in drive. The 4-wheel drive system is in automatic. We'll brake torque it. Oof, love the sound. This thing feels quick. It leaps off the line. 6.35 seconds there. So I was expecting this one to be on the quicker end because it is around 500 pounds lighter than the 4-door Heritage edition that I tested about a year and a half ago. But that time is pretty impressive, at least for a vehicle like this. It smokes a Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. So that's kind of what I would compare this car to, although the 4-door version would be the one I would go for me personally, because I like the additional practicality. The 2-door is definitely the cooler variant, but at the same time, the 2-door versions just don't sell in the way that the 4-doors do. But I love the sound of this V6. It's hooked up to a really refined 10-speed auto that Ford has been just improving over the years. Let's try another run here. This time we won't brake torque it, we'll just floor it. 7.12 seconds there. Now that's with it more going slightly uphill, so we'll take the 6.35 as our best time. And I have to say, the EcoBoost V6 is typically like a $2,500 extra charge on the 4-door version. I think it's kind of worth the extra money, even though the 4-cylinder already offers 300 horsepower on its own. This V6 just has the extra torque. It's got the mid-range grunt. It's got the sonorous sounds of a 6-cylinder as opposed to a 4. Although if you want the manual transmission, you'll have to go for the 4-cylinder. I still, to this day, have not driven a Bronco Raptor, which the Raptor, by the way, is attainable now. Ford significantly dropped the price, so you only have to spend about $5 grand more over this model to get the Raptor. And until I drive the Raptor, I can't tell you if that's the better buy. But what I can tell you is this powertrain is the perfect partner for the latest Bronco chassis. I mean, this car continues to be a body on frame, heavily, more capable version of the Ranger, essentially. You have an independent front suspension, live axle in the back. This model has the Fox shocks on it. It's typically an extra $2,300. It's not quite the same hardcore Fox 4.0 shocks that are in the Raptor, but the ride quality in this vehicle on these 35-inch tall tires with the Sasquatch package is actually quite agreeable. I love just how capable this car feels. Even if you guys don't plan to take it off-road that much, the Bronco has surprisingly civilized on-road manners, and that's what makes this car, so appealing, especially if you guys are coming from a Wrangler. It feels pretty much as refined to drive in terms of the ride, in terms of the handling, in terms of the steering, as like a Toyota 4Runner. Even though you do have to deal with the noise, this car does have a lot of exhaust noise coming in, or at least synthesized engine noise coming in, and you also hear a fair amount of wind noise coming in through the these roof panels and whatnot. But if I was going to pick one of these more hardcore SUVs to drive off-road, it would definitely be this model. I would choose, or to drive it on the road more than off the road, I would definitely choose this model because it just has a much more civilized feel than a Wrangler, and I think that's what Ford got right with the Bronco. I'm still waiting for Ford to eventually do like a hybridized, plug-in hybrid version of the Bronco, but this thing is surprisingly civil. And I also find these seats, these are the synthetic leather seats that you got with the Stroppe edition. They are comfortable, supportive. Ford sadly does not offer a ventilated seat or anything like that, but you do get 3-level heat. This model doesn't have power seats either. You can get power seats now on a Wrangler, but overall, this is still a very civilized vehicle to drive on the road. The other thing I love about the Ford Bronco is the fact that this vehicle has a full-time 4-wheel drive system with an automatic setting. So you can either switch it between 2-high, which is rear-wheel drive. There's also a 4A, which is an automatic mode, which means it'll essentially send power to the front wheels whenever it senses slippage at the back wheels. That's something that Toyota just doesn't offer on the 4Runner. Same thing, I believe, with Jeep. Although Jeep's full-time system is also kind of a much more mechanical setup where you have like a lever to move around. But regardless, this Bronco is a really refined, modern, body-on-frame off-roader. Yet at the same time, it feels old school. And that's kind of been the success of the Bronco, I think. In terms of visibility, I can see out of the front and the sides quite well. The view out of the back is not too bad, although the rear seat headrests do get in the way. There is no digital camera rearview mirror, and if you want, you can take these panels off. The one thing Ford still does not offer, however, that Jeep got really right, is that Sky One Touch roof that you can basically slide back as a canvas. I'm still waiting for Ford to eventually offer that. I think that's a feature that Jeep owners really love, and the Bronco still does not offer that. They only offer the soft top or the removable hard top, like my particular test car here. Now, in terms of fuel efficiency, this model has just under a 21-gallon fuel tank. It's rated at 17 in the city and 18 on the highway. And in my week's worth of testing, I averaged 15.5 miles to the gallon in mostly city driving. On the highway, the best I got was around 17. So not great gas mileage. That's kind of where the Wrangler has the 4xe hybridized, plug-in hybrid powertrain. Still waiting for Ford to eventually do something like that. With its 21-gallon fuel tank, theoretically, you should be able to do around 350 miles of range. The best I did was just over 300 miles of range. That is on regular gas, at least. This vehicle is a little thirsty, especially if you like to dip into the throttle and listen to that V6 sing. So kind of keep that in mind for those longer road trips. But overall, the Bronco is still definitely one of my favorites in terms of, a more traditional, capable off-roader with the ability to remove the roof panels, the doors, for example. It's a much more refined vehicle and modern vehicle than the Wrangler, and it really gets me thinking, what's Jeep going to do for the next generation Wrangler? We are due for an all-new generation Wrangler at some point. Ford has definitely kept the Bronco relatively fresh. Aside from the older Sync 4 infotainment system, you can see my phone is connected with the CarPlay. It does allow for a full screen CarPlay functionality, although technically the Wrangler now offers a 12.3-inch display. I still prefer the size of the Ford system because it's more of a rectangle as opposed to it's a little more square as opposed to a skinny rectangular that's in the Wrangler. I also like the Ford's fully digital cluster, which is just nicer. The steering in this car is so much better. It just is much more precise because it's a rack and pinion style power steering as opposed to a recirculating ball. So overall, the Stroppe edition, it's an expensive proposition, and to be honest, until I drive the Raptor, I'm not sure if I think it's worth this money or just spend the extra $5,000 for the Raptor, considering you get way more capability and performance, but it's also a much more bulkier and heavier vehicle versus this car. But it is nice how Ford offers something that's so unique, and for a car that's been out for a few years, I am relatively shocked at how much attention this car gets, especially when you have it in the 4 different paint colors that the Stroppe edition comes in. Now, with just under 110,000 units sold last year, the Ford Bronco has been such a huge sales success for Ford. In fact, as you guys know, Ford offers 2 versions of the Bronco. One is a completely different model, the Bronco Sport, and then of course there's the big Bronco, which is just called the Bronco. This is the Bronco that off-road enthusiasts know. The Bronco Sport's designed more for, I guess, the family person looking for a crossover that has more off-road capability. Between the 2 versions, Ford sells nearly 240,000 units in America last year, so this has again been a huge success. So after spending a full week with the Bronco Stroppe edition, I have to say, I've always loved this car. It's just a much easier car to live with versus the Wrangler. And of course, while it does have its faults, the infotainment system is starting to get a little dated. It doesn't offer any kind of electrified powertrain option. You can't get the one-touch roof, which would be a nice feature, especially if you don't feel like taking off all the roof panels. This model definitely is still my go-to if you guys are looking for an off-road or factory-built off-road vehicle that doesn't necessarily beat you up on the road. And there's a lot of choices out there, of course, between the Jeep Wrangler, which is the proven model as well, the Bronco, there's the Toyota 4Runner. Nissan is coming out with an all-new Xterra at some point. That's already been confirmed. And of course, there's the Land Rover Defender and the new Ineos Grenadier, which I also had a chance to spend a week with. There is still something to be had with this model. The interior is relatively comfortable, even with the two-door configuration. The back seat is usable, the trunk space is usable. It's a relatively easy car to live with on a daily basis, and you can actually drive this vehicle on the highway where it doesn't beat you up. The twin-turbo V6 delivers solid performance. 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds is going to be fast enough for a lot of people. You just be prepared to constantly fill this thing up because it has that small fuel tank. I'm not sure why I mentioned earlier during the driving scene that it had the 21 gallon fuel tank. My brain just for some reason was thinking that it was the 4-door version, which again, the 4-door has a bigger fuel tank. The Raptor version has the biggest fuel tank because it has the thirstiest engine. The downside, of course, when you guys want the Stroppe edition is it's going to cost you a pretty penny because you can get into a base Bronco 2-door for just under $40,000. Ford technically doesn't even charge you extra for the 4-door version. I thought they would, but when I was on the configurator, it actually showed the same price. Now, most people are probably going to step it up to at least the Badlands or the Outer Banks trim. Those are going to cost, you know, in the low or high $40,000 to mid $50,000 range. But the Stroppe edition, or the Stroppe edition, I'm probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize if I am, is going to cost you at least $75,000. And that's because this car has the very unique paint job. It's got that Fox suspension. It's got the Sasquatch package, of course. It's got the Lux package that you typically add as an extra on all of the other trims, plus the destination charge, and this model here is around 77 grand. I know it's almost $78,000, but I also want you to remember, I mentioned earlier the Raptor. The Bronco Raptor, when it first came out, was over $100,000. Ford has significantly dropped the price of that model to around $82,000. So for 5 grand more, you essentially get more horsepower and even more capable suspension, 4 doors for extra practicality, but also a much wider body, which could be a little more cumbersome if you guys live in, you know, a more tightly urban environment. So for that reason, think of the Stroppe edition or the Stroppe edition as almost like a Bronco Raptor Lite, especially if you guys want the 2-door version, because this thing has all the capability that you could possibly need, but at the same time, it's also still livable out in the street and also usable if you guys plan to drive this vehicle on the road mostly. Well, all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2025 Ford Bronco Stroppe edition. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.